You're tuned in to Positively Terrible. I'm producer Dan, and each week my buddy Scott and I discuss surviving and thriving after trauma. It's a journey that started when Scott, his wife's fiance, and her boyfriend all walked into a bar. This week's decent human being is Angelie. She's got a messed up story about getting laid off. Settle in, my terrible listeners. Today's episode is going to be positively terrible.
I was nervous and stressed because I thought you were the best. I was right.
Hey, Scott.
Dan, what's going on, man?
Well, that's my second run through the intro because I screwed it up the first time and I forgot to hit start. But now we're recording and I feel real good about everything. So,
all right. Well, could we start over? I think you've made some. Never mind. We've got to get going. Yeah, you made it through the second time and it was pretty awesome. We probably talk a little too much about how you do in the intro, but it's one of the most fascinating things. I'm gonna go out on a limb and say that that's the favorite part of our guests being here. Their favorite part is not just listening to you read, but watching you do it too. You're quite the professional.
You like to see my hands move when I talk?
I like to see your hands move. Just everything, Dan. You're wonderful at it. And Angelie, what do you think? Is that? Are you impressed already?
I am. Dan, you did an amazing job.
All right.
Thank you so much. I really like the way we're really building me up this time, guys.
Yeah, Dan, you're an amazing guy. I'm going to record an episode dedicated just to all of your talent someday. But that is not what we're here for today.
No.
Today we're here to talk about Angelie getting laid off after building up a career. And before I say anything to you, Angelie, what I'm going to say is this is very timely for me. I'm leaving my job. It was just announced at work this week, so I can talk about it. And I've built my career up over 18 years, worked my way into management, and just kind of decided I've hit the end of the road here and am going to pursue other adventures. And it's a weird and scary time. But we're not here to talk about that either. We're here to talk about you. So, Angelie, can you tell us a little bit about your career? I believe it was healthcare that you were working in. Is that correct?
Yes,
how'd you get into
I've
that?
been in healthcare. Yeah. It's actually through my mom and my family. I have a family of healthcare practitioners. My mom's been a nurse all of her life. Same thing with my aunt, and I have several uncles. Same thing. And so I was kind of steered in that direction, if you will. And so that's how I got into healthcare. I was in healthcare for over 20 years. I started on the clinical side.
Mm-hmm.
And I started as a scrub tech. I don't know if you guys know what that is. They're the people in surgery who hand the surgeons instruments.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. I've seen them on TV before.
Yeah, probably on Scrubs or something.
Exactly. All right.
But yeah, so I did that for a while, and then I got tired of, wearing a mask all day and being in a cold OR and never
ORs
seeing
are
anybody
really
while they were
cold.
awake. They are, yeah. They keep them like around 50 or below. So yeah.
Is there a reason for that? I'm sorry. That's probably not important to this
Yeah,
conversation, but I assume there's a reason.
Yeah, no, people are always curious about that. But yeah, they keep it that cold to prevent like germs and infections.
Okay.
Yeah, it's
But yeah.
too cold for
But
organisms
anyway.
to reproduce, typically.
Exactly.
All right. Good to know.
So I did that for a number of years, and then I decided to hop onto the administrative side and, started at an entry-level position and made my way up to the management ranks and, got into, we've discussed this, Scott, that, I actually today I'm a leadership coach and I work with managers who are struggling because that's a, really difficult transition to make.
Mm-hmm.
And you've been in management, so I'm sure you know.
Oh, yeah.
And then, I want to say it was my fourth or fifth year as a manager. I was with a company that, had just merged with another company and because of financial stresses and, just one day walked into the office, thought it was a normal, typical work day. And then I get called into my boss's office And the meeting said check in. So I was expecting, she's just gonna check in, see how things are going, and before I know it, she tells me that they're laying me off and hands me my little pink slip and a couple boxes to empty out my office and shooed me on my way. So that's how that happened.
Yeah, and an experience that a lot of people have gone through. It doesn't make it any easier to know that a lot of people have gone through it, at least not in that moment. But
Right.
I want to take it back a little bit and just ask, was management something that you aspired to go into? Was that always kind of the plan? Or was it something that just kind of happened?
Yeah, it was definitely something that just kind of happened, and I think that's how a lot of managers end up being managers.
It's probably good for your business that's how people end up managers.
Exactly. But yeah, I mean, I was, doing really well in my different positions. I mean, I would probably get bored with a position every 1 or 2 years just because, I'm a type A personality. I'm an overachiever. I'm really ambitious. So, I did move up the career ladder pretty quickly, but it was never my intention to end up in the management ranks. It's just, you get called into your boss's office and they say, hey, you're doing a great job and we have this position opening up and we wanted to know if you'd be interested. And, at that time, again, me being ambitious and an overachiever, I went ahead and, decided to give it a shot. And I actually went back to school to get my 4-year degree in healthcare and management administration.
Okay.
But yeah, it definitely wasn't something that I was aspiring to. And talking to other people who have become managers, a majority of them is the same thing.
Yeah.
They were kind of singled out as you have great job performance, you're a team player. Let's try you as a manager. And then they get into a management position. And it's like, whoa, this is not what I expected.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
and it's going to be hard for me not put on my director hat during this conversation because I see this all the time, and it makes me wonder, in this situation, before you were presented with this opportunity, had your manager ever talked to you about, is this the direction you want to go? Was there ever career path conversations, or was it just, hey, we've got this opportunity for you, and setting it up like this is the best thing ever? You're going to, because I know a lot of times that's how it happens. It's like, oh, hey, Dan, you want to be manager? This is going to be great for you. And Dan may never have wanted to manage people. So what were your feelings at that point? Was that kind of the next step that you were ready for, or it was presented to you? It sounds like it was more of being presented to you.
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely more presented to me, and then I took it as, okay, let me prepare myself for this next step by going back to school.
Oh, okay.
But I mean, I definitely feel like, and that's kind of one of the things, my soapbox talks that I talk about with working with managers in the workplace, is that, most of them are promoted because they're seen by, their boss or the hiring manager as, again, being a good performer in the current job that they're doing. They're a good team player, but that doesn't necessarily, correlate into being able to lead.
It's not the same skill set.
Because it's a whole different skill set.
Yeah, I'm
exactly.
sorry.
It's a whole different skill set. No, please. It's a whole different skill set, like you said. It's a whole different approach and a perspective. And and they never prepare you for that. Nobody ever told me that. Other managers that I talked to, crickets, blind.
Yeah.
Nobody told me.
And I, as a manager, as a director, one thing that I'd like the world to know is a little bit, we talked about it, the Peter principle, getting promoted to the level of your own incompetence. You're great at a job, so what do? You get promoted. You're great at that job. What happens? You get promoted. You're not so great at that job, so you stay there. And then you end up with people in the wrong positions for their skill set. And it's kind of messed up the way. And the reason I say I wish everyone could hear this is because I very strongly believe in creating kind of your own career path and working on with your managers on what that is. And it's such a rare thing to happen in the workforce today.
Exactly. I totally agree on that. And, I don't know if we talked about this before, but when you have people in these positions of authority that, aren't quite ready for them yet, I mean, that's when you get all kinds of problems. That's when we get unhealthy work environments, toxic work environments. They don't know how to handle managing different personalities, making good decisions that aren't based on, emotions or trying to be liked instead of doing the right thing. So, that's where, things, it's really at the detriment of a company to have somebody who is not effective in a position like that because, it's costing the company all kinds of stuff like high turnover rates, lost revenue.
Yeah.
I mean, I can just go on and on and on.
Yeah, and I could too, Angelie, and I'm not going to let either of us do that because this is not a business podcast, but I love talking about this type of stuff. So let's kind of get back to your career track. So you went back to school, became manager, all of that fun stuff, and one day you're called to a check-in.
Exactly.
And you walk in.
Called into a check-in.
Who was in the room when you walked in, or was it over like was it in person or was it over Zoom or something?
No. I mean, she at least had the decency to do it in person.
Okay. Well,
So yeah, I walked into her office, and it was her, and then it was also another manager that I worked very closely with, who was in there as well. And so when I walked in there and I saw him in there as well, I did think that was kind of odd.
Okay.
That, I thought this was kind of a check-in and there's somebody else in the room. But anyway, I just decided to go with it. Maybe, there was a dual project or something that she wanted to talk about or something like that. But yeah.
Yeah. Well, so it wasn't HR. It was just another manager that was in the room. Okay.
Yes.
Unusual to me, but
Yeah.
I know healthcare is a lot different than, I was going to say the corporate world, but I guess healthcare is pretty corporate these days too.
Well, yeah, now that you mention it, that is kind of odd. But, again, the company had just gone through a merger and we were going through some difficult, organizational and financial stuff. So, yeah. But yeah, no, not that you mentioned that. That is kind of odd.
So what did they say to you?
So she basically said that because this new structure that we had gotten in with our company, we went from, the doctors kind of being employees to the doctors being owners. So, she sat me down and she just said, sorry to tell you this, but the doctors have decided to let you go. And, that was pretty much it. She, was very apologetic, wanted me to stay in touch, let her know where I landed next. And like I said, handed me paperwork and a couple of empty boxes, and there you go.
It sounds, and it always is going to sound this way, no matter how much empathy someone may have, but it sounds cold, right?
Yeah. And I think it definitely is. I mean, I mentioned this before that I have actually been on both sides of a layoff.
Yeah.
I've been the one doing the laying off as well as receiving. And, until that happened to me, I didn't realize just how traumatizing it can be for a person. So it was very eye-opening. I mean, of course you don't want it to happen. Really think about, when I'm on the other side of that chair, to be more empathetic and understanding and compassionate. And, definitely, I started in my future positions, I started to really fight for my team members. Whenever the higher ups were talking about reorganization or we have too many people on this side or something, I really I became this mama bear of my people and started to fight for them because, again, having that experience, I know how devastating it can be. And if there was any way that I could figure out how to keep somebody on when they were thinking of laying them off, I would totally do it. I would, try and do these jigsaw puzzles of, well, we could do this over here.
Yeah.
So.
And I'd expect nothing less. You seem like an empathetic and decent human being. So, but I want to go back to that day and the time, like right after that happened. So, what were you thinking when you're being talked at? Was it literally like the first thing that you were told is that, we're letting you go?
Oh yeah.
And
Yeah, that was the premise of the conversation. It lasted about 5 minutes.
yeah. So the next 4.5 minutes, what are you thinking? Can you put yourself back in that position?
Yeah, I totally can. I mean, I was completely shocked, completely taken off guard. I mean, again, there was no indication that this was something that was going to happen. In fact, just 3 months prior, I had the most glowing annual review I had ever had in my career. I had, on the scale of 1 to 5, how they score you, I scored fives on all but 2 categories, and told that I was an asset to the company and all these other, positive feedback things. So yeah, it definitely caught me off guard. I wasn't expecting it at all. I mean, again, I knew that the company wasn't doing very well, but I didn't think that it had come to a point to where they were going to start laying off managers.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I was definitely shocked, devastated. I mean, the word that came out of my mouth when she said that, I was like, wow, oh my gosh, what? Yeah.
So, I mean, it sounds like things. You were almost. How do I say this? And especially, how do I say it without putting words in your mouth? Because I am really good at putting words in other people's mouths. Things were going very well. It sounds like you had a career, which is something a lot of people don't have, right? Just
Right.
fast growth, fast advancement. Went back to school and everything. Dedicated to it. Were you kind of wrapped up in your identity? I mean, was your career kind of wrapped up in your identity? I mean,
Yes, you hit the nail right on the head there. I mean, again, with my being a type A and an overachiever, I was very career focused. I made, I mean, after I got laid off, and I'm sure we'll talk about that in a bit, but I went into an identity crisis because, like you're saying, my identity was my job title and my job. So when I got that ripped away from me, I all of a sudden was really lost and didn't know where I was. And I also, kind of looked up and realized that like 10 years had flown by because I had been so career focused, and I lost touch with so many people that, I had previously had relationships with. And I didn't realize that, all of that had happened while I was kind of in this narrow field of, being successful in my career, continuing to climb up that ladder type thing. So yeah.
yeah. And one of the emotions I'll say that I struggle with at times is shame. And I'm wondering if, even though it's the company not doing well, did you feel shame and did you feel it all over again every time you had to tell someone too?
Well, yeah, I definitely felt shame. And, that was one of the things that really surprised me. And then also working with other people, talking to other people who had been laid off too. And that's kind of why it's so taboo, is that there is this component of shame, even though most of the time when you're getting laid off, it is not because of something you did. It's because of, a choice made by somebody else, or because your company isn't doing well. But yeah, there is this component of feeling shame, that happened to you. And then, yeah, it's definitely hard to tell other people. It took me years before I was comfortable saying, oh yeah, I got laid off. Before I would, try and come up with different wordings, or say, something else happened. Just because, again, there's a lot of shame around it, and it was uncomfortable to talk about.
That day, that night, how did you process it? I mean, I know there was an age when I would have gone out and gotten drunk. I know that there's been an age where I would have probably gone to bed and slept 18 hours. We all process things in different ways. So what did you do in that day when you logged off, left? What did you do?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of went through a myriad of, roller coaster emotions. At first I was shocked. Then I was, angry. Then I felt betrayed. Then, of course, lots of tears, lots of angry crying, sad crying, crying out of frustration. And then I spent a number of days kind of going through that, woe is me. Why did this happen to me? Why me? type of thing. And I mean, I'll be honest, I went into a depression after that for several months.
Yeah. Did you realize?
And my confidence.
Did you realize
Actually,
it?
I didn't.
Okay.
No, I didn't. Not at first. I didn't realize it until hindsight when, I kind of got out of that funk, and then I kind of looked back in hindsight and said, oh, wow, I was pretty depressed. My husband knew, and, he told me later. But yeah, I went into a depression during that time. And again, just seeing things in a different perspective, because how many people get laid off that, spend, months in a depressed state, and, people don't even realize it, because again, most of the time when you're in that state, you either don't know, you don't realize it, or you don't share, so yeah.
I find that I never know. I've actually told some of my friends some of the behaviors that they might see, and there's one specifically who I have asked her to tell me, even if I'm not depressed, I want her to say, hey, Scott, I'm seeing this behavior. I know that sometimes that you do that when you're depressed, and I promise to do the same for her. And I think that's one of the hardest things, is even recognizing how the hell are you even going to pull yourself out. And pull yourself out, I don't know that I even like that term, because it's not necessarily pulling yourself out, but it's really hard when you don't know just how low you are. And then you've got the inertia of just sitting around or whatever, however you're coping with depression. And it's a terrible thing. When you said that was about 3 months, did you seek out therapy, or were you already going to therapy, or did you do something that helped at that point?
No, I was not. I didn't go to therapy. I didn't seek it out or anything, because again, I really didn't know that's what was happening to me, because I was just in this, like you're saying, super low state for months, and
you're expected to now find a new job, right? You're in that state. So
exactly. And I was going to talk about say that when I started interviewing to get into find another position, that's when I really kind of started to get an idea that I wasn't, I would say my normal, because I bombed every interview, and I must have done like 12 interviews or something. And it was like, on paper, it looked good, but I just didn't have the confidence that I needed to have to do well in those interviews to get another position. And I know that I've worked with other people who it's been the same thing, that, because of what happened to them, that they have the skills and the knowledge, and they have great work ethic to be able to get another position. But because of just their lack of confidence and self-esteem because of getting laid off, it takes them, months, and they end up, needing to talk to somebody like me to help them.
Yeah, for sure. And how long did it take before you got that resume updated and started to try to put yourself out there?
Yeah, so I intentionally took, because I got a 3-month severance pay when they let me go. So I intentionally took that 3 months to just, kind of sit there and lick my wounds.
Yeah. Well, I say good for you. Was that the right decision, or do you think you might have come out of it sooner had you, started applying and everything? Or
no, I definitely think that 3 months was a blessing, because it gave me time to think about what my next steps were. And instead of going back to being a manager, I actually pivoted and got into coaching. That's how I got into to my coaching business and what I do today. Yeah. So, ultimately getting laid off was a huge blessing. Yeah. But yeah, it definitely wasn't, I did not see it as that at the time.
Yeah. Well, Angelie, what I will say is I've got so much to say given where I'm at, and I'm going to try to do the same thing. Take some time. I'm very lucky to be at a point in my life where I can, and if I'm being completely honest, I've had long COVID. The listeners are sick about hearing about it. Other people are sick about hearing about it, but I haven't talked to you about it. So, and it's kind of destroyed it. Even that's destroyed like some of my confidence. It's like when I'm staring at a computer and can't even come up with the word to type. It's like, can I ever function can I be myself anymore? And it's a terrible place to be. So you got to sit around and lick your wounds, and you said you bombed a bunch of interviews.
I did.
Was there any signs of like promise in these interviews, or were you just leaving them like, what the hell just happened? What the
Exactly.
Okay.
No, yeah, exactly. I was walking out of those rooms going, what was that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And-
It was bad for a while.
Okay. And
And the thing is that the healthcare community, I mean, it's large, but in terms of networking as a professional, it's pretty small. So, I was burning bridges pretty fast. And I know that people were talking to people, so I was like, I have to get my shit together. Oh,
You mean burning-
There's my one swear word. I have to get my stuff together, or, I'm going to run out of opportunities.
yeah, when you say burning bridges, do you just mean by your performance in these interviews, or was there something else going on?
No. Just, my performance in these interviews. I mean, and then also other people vouching for me, saying, oh yeah, you should talk to Angelie. She's an amazing manager. She'd be a great addition to your organization. And they kind of go in there and then totally suck. And then they're like, okay, what was that? And then going back to the person who referred me, what are you talking about? What did you just do to me?
Right. Well, in the small world of healthcare, it is their reputation at stake to some extent.
Exactly.
God, that must have been hard. I'm sorry you went through that. So at what point did things start to turn around?
Yeah, so it actually started to turn around when again, like I mentioned earlier, I really went through an identity crisis when that happened. I definitely felt super lost. I didn't really know who I was. I had wrapped up my whole being into my job title of being a manager and focusing on my career. And so, when you're at home for that long with nothing to do, there's a lot of, ruminating and stuff. And I really had to start focusing on, who am I? I really started to question, did I even want to go back to a job? I mean, I was going on these interviews because, for income really. And it's what I had done in the past. But I really started to look at, was I going to be happy going back to another management position? Was this something that I wanted, the path that I wanted to continue on? Or is there, I had an opportunity to possibly go in a different direction. So I really started to do a lot of mindfulness work, journaling, meditating, and things like that, and really trying to discover, who I was and what it is that I really wanted to do, instead of feeling pressured to go a certain direction because of different reasons, like feeling pressured to continue to be a manager because we needed the income, or feeling pressured to go in a certain direction because that's what people expected of me or told me to do. So really trying to create my own destiny, if you will, and take control of my life rather than feeling like I was getting pushed around in places where I really didn't want to go.
Yeah, Angelie, I'm everything you're saying is resonating with me. So sorry, listeners, you very much have to hear too much Scott in this one, because I am looking at you and thinking of questions that are for my benefit. Hopefully other people are getting something out of it as well, but for my benefit. And how did you know? I mean, that's a weird question maybe, but I'm not going to say I have an identity crisis. I am having an identity crisis, maybe. Because is so much I love about managing. There really is. And a lot of people don't have that passion.
Right. It's definitely a calling.
But there's the other side as well. And
yes,
it's hard. And you mentioned that you've been on both sides of layoffs. Like one of the hardest days of my life was laying people off because of COVID.
Oh, yeah.
And there was 1 2-person team, and I had to lay off one of the people on that team. And I called the other person afterwards because I wanted to speak with her. I thought I owed her that. And I had to hang up because I started crying on the phone because it was horrible.
Yeah.
So I do want listeners to know that that's pretty fucking traumatic too. most
it is.
managers,
It is.
most leaders are not looking to lay people off. And,
Right.
I've been lucky that I have not had to do it more than once, but that's an experience. And then I feel guilty for feeling guilty or for feeling bad because I'm not the one losing my income. I'm not the one whose world was just kind of pulled out from underneath them.
Mm-hmm.
But I also took pride a little bit. I had heard that there were other people who had their managers that do the work for them, and I thought, no, this is my job. I am the director of this department. This is my job, as much as it fucking sucks. But do you find in your coaching that a lot of people feel that they've got to continue on the path that they've always been on? Because that's where I've been for a long time. Is I feel like because I ended up in management, and a lot of that was, like you, I succeeded. There were expectations. I was a straight A student, all of that stuff. And I think people expected a lot out of me. And I followed the path I thought I was supposed to follow. And I didn't know I could get off that path. It felt overwhelming. Is that one of the bigger challenges that the people you work with run into? Is I'm kind of stuck. I've got this job or this career, and I don't know how to do anything about that.
Yeah, definitely. A majority of the people that I work with, they find that even if they came to me and they didn't know that ahead of time, is when we start working together and like peeling the layers of the onion away, they find that gosh, maybe I don't want to go this direction. I've had managers that I've worked with end up going into doing different things. I had a gal who'd been a manager for a number of years decide to pivot and go into project management. Because she, like, kind of like you, and also me, is there's parts of the job that you love. And she loved, doing the project type stuff, but she didn't like, kind of dealing with the people stuff, because that's hard, as we're talking about, especially when you have to deliver bad news. So she, decided to just focus on that and go into project management, and she's doing extremely well. And I had another gentleman who was a director who came to me, and his exact words were, "I have this incredible career and life, but I'm so unhappy. Help me figure out why." And, we figured out that he just wasn't in alignment with what he was doing, and he ended up pivoting and going somewhere else too. So yeah, that's definitely, something that I find in working with people that I work with.
Okay. And I do want to go back a little bit to when you got laid off, because I meant to say it, and I think that perhaps I said it when we talked previously, but losing your job is, it's like any other loss. It's grief, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And it sounds like you were describing, kind of going through a lot of stages of grief.
Oh, yeah.
And
yeah.
Did you, despite being told the reason and having the glowing review, you said you lost your confidence. Did you blame yourself during that time?
Yeah, I think I definitely did. And again, just kind of like what you're pointing out is, even though, getting laid off is not necessarily your fault or anything that you did or didn't do, but it's very personal. It's hard to separate that event from taking it personally, when that the reason was actually more of a separate reason than it being about you. But it's such something that happens that's so personal to you that you can't help but feel like you did something that caused this, and that's when you go, like you're saying, through those grief stages and feeling having that lack of confidence and self-esteem, and having to kind of claw your way back out of that hole.
Yeah. And do you remember the moment that you felt like you kind of got your direction back?
I do. I actually, well, first of all, it took several months for that to happen, because I actually did decide to pursue coaching, and how I figured that out is, I really started to figure out what parts of my job did I love. And I loved coaching and mentoring my staff and physicians. It really warmed my heart when I could help someone achieve a goal, and then watch them achieve that and celebrate with them. So that's when I decided to go the coaching route and use my expertise that I gained over the years that I've been in management and leadership, and help other managers that I always saw struggling just like I had been, and seeing that some of them didn't make it. Some of them quit after just a few years when I knew that they had the potential to be a great leader. But anyway, that's where I started to go into. I went to life coaching school. I went into a training that was a year long, and in that experience, I really had to. We were really forced to deep dive into becoming more self-aware. Because that in turn is how you help people that you coach. And so it was very enlightening but painful at the same time, if that makes sense. Because learning about yourself is probably one of the most difficult things I've ever had to do.
Well,
and
it's
and at face value, it's like, learning about yourself, what's the big deal? Man, it's hard.
Well, I was just going to say that it's also not something that we're taught to do. It's
Exactly.
kind of incredible of how important it is and how positive the changes of my life have been since I learned about me. But I will really say that the learning about me accelerated. Well, I thought it accelerated in my 30s until I got to my 40s and realized I was wrong about a lot of things, and had the help of a therapist as well. And at that point, that's when I started to learn about me. And it's just not only, it's such a great tool to know, to recognize why you think or why you behave, and set yourself up to be successful.
Yes.
And it's such an incredible thing. And it's not anything. If I was designing curriculums for students, that would be something that I think should be all through. From the time you're a kid, you should be learning about introspection and understanding yourself. And I just wish that these resources were more available to everyone as well.
Exactly. I say that all the time. If these things were taught to us from, childhood, in our childhood school years, how different would our lives be,
Yeah.
How would our lives have gone different? So yeah, I totally agree with you there. But yeah, I went through, my journey of self-awareness and self-discovery. And, I've since learned in my experience and starting my own business and starting to travel around the world and be in different countries, that it's a process that you will continue to keep going through. So you'll keep repeating the same steps of the process in different situations. So it's not like, I've gone through this self-discovery journey, I'm really confident and I have this high self-esteem and I feel, I'm perfect and in this perfect place in my life. That's not realistic. No. It's a continuous cycle of learning and developing. So yeah.
And when I said that I thought I knew myself in my 30s and then I learned I didn't in my 40s, some of that was my own evolution, right? There were things I knew about myself and thought about myself, and I might not have been wrong, but things change, and I'm not the same human I was that I was back then.
Exactly. Yeah, we're always growing and developing.
Yeah, and I'll also say that from that perspective, learning about myself has been an eye-opening thing, and it's allowed me to maybe be more myself. Right,
exactly.
Because I think a lot of my life, including my career, I feel like was expectations. What does success look like? And for me, I don't need to be starting businesses and going public with them or anything. Success to me is having my home, having a career, that type of stuff. And
exactly,
I just gave up my career, and if it doesn't go right, that could result in me giving up my home. But it's just such an interesting thing about knowing ourselves and in the work life and personal life being intertwined. And I'm rambling, probably because I have so many more questions that, again, are for my own benefit, and I'm not going to make my listeners, our listeners, listen to all my questions. But if someone is thinking about career changes, what is your best advice? What do you want to tell the people if they're not sure about what they want in their future? They want a career change. What would be your best piece of advice? Your best piece of free advice. They can pay you if they want to go do the coaching.
But no, it's basically what we have been talking about for the last few minutes is becoming self-aware. Okay. Figuring out what it is that you want to do, who you are, what it is that you want to do, who do you want to be. Because again, you mentioned it, that a lot of our life is expectation, especially in our country. It's, living up to the Joneses, being like the Joneses, our neighbors, and always comparing and competing. And that's not what it's supposed to be about. That's typically not who we truly are. And, going through my self-discovery journey, I figured out that I was a complete stranger to myself. Yeah. And, how many other people are out there who might find themselves in the same place. But yeah, if you're contemplating a career change or you find yourself in a position where you've been laid off and you're trying to figure out what you want to do next, maybe you're not comfortable going back into the same job function that you just came from. Get to know yourself, figure out who you are, what your core values are, what makes you happy, what you want to do, and what type of legacy you want to leave behind. Okay. So yeah, that's my free advice.
Yeah, and I'm going to ask you one more question.
That's good free advice.
It is, and I think that I came to some of those conclusions recently. But and your answer might be exactly the same. This might not even be a good question, but that is what you want to do when you want to change a career. But what would you say would be the first thing that you'd tell someone to do when they unexpectedly lose their job?
Yeah, same thing, but I would add to let yourself go through that grieving process. It's traumatizing. Mm-hmm. You've been traumatized if you have lost your job and it wasn't your choice. It is go through that grieving process. And one of the things that was one of the things that helped me the most when I was going through that, and I also find it helpful for other people that I work with who have gotten laid off too, is again, go through the motions of your emotions. Mm-hmm. And one of those emotions that was huge for me was anger, because I felt betrayed by the people that I was working with who then decided to let me go. And again, I started to journal. And one of the most liberating things that I did is I took a day to write a letter to the people who I was angry at, who I felt betrayed me. And they never saw that letter. I never mailed it to them. I didn't email it to them. It was more for me to get out all of that emotion, a lot of it pent up emotion. I didn't even realize that I was, holding in, just to get it all out, get it off of my shoulders, and just let it go. Because when you can let that go, you won't realize it at the time, but that really deep emotion is holding you back from moving on. So when you let that go, you can move on to bigger and better things. And, I wrote that letters to a few people, and I actually ended up burning them as kind of, letting them go in that way. Yeah. It wasn't, I had to do it more than once, because again, it's a lot of deep rooted emotion. But yeah, I would add the same thing, go through your self-discovery process, figure out who you are, what you want to do. But then I would add to process your emotions. And if you need to write letters and burn them, you'll find that super helpful.
Yeah, I love that. Don't burn the bridges. Burn the paper.
No.
Burn the letters.
No. Exactly.
Okay. Great advice. I appreciate that. I think that a lot of people listening will appreciate it. And I shared with you when we first talked that I was a little bit worried. Not worried, that's the wrong word, but when I saw the topic, losing a job, my first thought was, gosh, we've had stalking, we've had cancer, we've had all, but in the end, it was like, wait, this is something a lot of people go through.
I think,
Yeah.
frankly,
And-
that's one of the most traumatic things that I have been through in my adult life.
And probably one of the more,
And again, we don't talk
Yeah.
about it, right? It's like taboo to talk about.
yeah, and I was going to say,
It's like, oh, you got laid off? No big deal.
probably,
It is a
Right.
big deal.
probably one of the more relatable things too, because so many people have
Yeah.
been through it. And
Exactly.
you lose so much more than a paycheck. You lose your community.
Yes.
You lose your identity. You lose a lot
Yes.
of things, and
Hmm.
there's the grief and everything. So I think ultimately this is a very powerful topic and a very relevant topic, and I think we're going to get a lot of value from it. So thank you so much, Angelie. I really appreciate you being here. You've been a great guest. Is there
Yeah.
anything else that you'd like to say? Whether it's plug something, what's your websites, your socials? Tell us a good joke. I don't care. Just one last thing for our audience.
Yeah, one last thing for the audience that I would say, I'm not going to plug anything that I'm doing. If you do want to check me out, it's www.oversightglobal.com.
Okay.
And you can find all of my socials there and everything about my programs.
That'll be
there.
in the show notes, too.
And I just
Yeah, we'll share it.
Oh, awesome. Awesome. But yeah, I just want to leave the audience with, again, self-awareness. It's so important. It's something we're not taught, something we don't do, but it changes your life. Figure out who you are, learn to like yourself, and most importantly, learn to love yourself. And that's what I'll leave with.
Man, what powerful words to end. My favorite. Thank you so much. You've been amazing, and you passed the decent human being test. You're awesome, Angelie. Dan, I speak for Dan all the time because he's the silent type over there.
The strong, silent one on the podcast.
Exactly.
He's got the looks. I've got the voice, so I do the talking. But Dan and I are grateful. We're honored. We're humbled. I don't have enough words to tell you about the way that it makes me feel when you are willing to share such an important and traumatic experience with us. So thank you
so much for having me and for providing this platform to do it. It's you guys are great.
Yeah,
amazing
for
work.
sure. I great might be a strong word, but
We try not to suck.
No, you guys don't suck at all. You're way beyond suck.
All right.
It's very kind of you.
All right.
This
you may not
episode
believe
did
this.
not suck, and that's because of you. So thank you so much for
Yes.
that.
And you guys
thank
are
you.
so far from sucking or whatever you said might be the nicest things anyone's ever said to me. So on that note, I can't say any more except this experience has been absolutely, positively terrible.
I met you back at Tonic Fest. I confess I was nervous and stressed because I thought you were the best. I was right, and that night we got into a water gun fight that I won. I shot you in the face. It was fate. I offered you a spree. You declined. I said, keep it. You might decide to change your mind. You did. Yeah, you did. Now I'm glad. I got you in my life, it's alright. If you don't wanna spree, confess I was nervous and stressed because I thought you were the best, I was right.
Positively Terrible is a part of the Terrible Podcast Network.